In a world filled with digital noise, there are those who move through it quietly, leaving little trace of themselves behind. They watch, listen, and observe, but rarely share their own image. Most people don't stop to wonder why. Why would someone choose not to post their photo when so many others eagerly share theirs without hesitation? Why do they prefer the background when everyone else seems drawn to the spotlight? Common assumptions point to fear, insecurity, or shyness, but the reality is far more complex, deeply human, and much more intriguing. The psychology of those who don't share their photos isn't about absence, it's about presence. It's about choosing silence in a world that constantly asks for more. It's about valuing depth in a landscape obsessed with surface-level highlights. If you've ever hesitated before uploading a picture, if you've ever felt an unspoken discomfort when facing the camera, or if you've questioned why sharing your face with strangers feels strangely heavy, then this story is, in a way, also about you. Let's step into the mind of someone who doesn't post their image online. Not through clichés or assumptions, but through the deeper psychological truths that shape a person who chooses invisibility over exposure. It often begins with a moment many recognize but rarely discuss. The moment you open your camera, see your reflection, and feel a sudden wave of self-awareness. You don't need to explain it. You simply close the app and continue with your day, not out of sadness or anxiety, but with a gentle certainty that you don't need to be seen to exist. This is where the psychology truly begins. Many don't realize how much of modern life is shaped by what experts call external identity feedback. The idea that we measure ourselves through reactions, comments, likes, and digital signals. But those who don't share their photos often operate from a different psychological center. They aren't avoiding attention, they simply don't require it to feel real. For them, identity is built from within, through thoughts, memories, experiences, and reflections, not through snapshots. Because their self-worth isn't tied to being perceived, they don't feel the emotional pull to post themselves. The world asks for faces, they seek meaning. The world values visibility, they value authenticity. The world encourages expression. They crave understanding. This is the first quiet truth. People who rarely post their photos are often more anchored internally than motivated externally. They build their sense of self from the inside out, not the outside in, making them distinct in a digital landscape that often measures life through a lens. There's another layer, something even deeper. Those who don't share their images often see the world in stories rather than pictures. They notice the atmosphere of moments, the quiet of early mornings, the honesty in conversations, the subtle shifts in human behavior. When they enter a room, they don't think about how the lighting would look in a selfie. They sense the mood. They observe, they absorb, and because of this, they naturally pull back from anything that feels performative. Posting a photo doesn't feel wrong to them. It just feels unnecessary. They don't crave the validation loop because their minds are drawn more to the internal world than the external display. Some people express themselves by showing their face, others express themselves through their thoughts. These individuals belong to the second group. They communicate through words, actions, creative work, and observation, not through curated images. It's not that they can't post, it's that posting doesn't feel like their natural language. But there's another dimension, one seldom explored. Those who don't share their photos often have a unique relationship with vulnerability, not fear or avoidance, but discernment. They understand something many overlook. Once you post an image of yourself online, it stops being fully yours. It becomes a public object open to interpretation, criticism, misunderstanding, and projection. While some are comfortable with that, others feel a subtle emotional boundary being crossed. For them, showing their face isn't a casual act, it's an intimate one. And intimacy for them must be earned, not given away freely. They don't hide, they protect. They choose carefully who gets to see the unfiltered parts of their existence. There's a certain emotional intelligence in this, a self-awareness that understands the difference between openness and exposure. People often mistake privacy for insecurity, but in truth, privacy is a form of emotional strength. It takes discipline to hold something back in a world that encourages constant revelation. Now let's go even deeper to a place most people never consider. Those who don't post their photos often come from one of three psychological backgrounds. First, they may have grown up in environments where attention felt overwhelming, not harmful, just too intense. Perhaps they were the quiet child in a loud family or the reflective one among extroverts. They learned early that being seen isn't the same as being understood, and so they developed a preference for a softer presence. Second, they may have experienced a phase where they felt overly observed, maybe at school, in social circles, or during a time of change. And as a result, they developed a natural desire to reclaim ownership of their identity. Posting a photo can feel like giving away a piece of themselves they'd rather keep. Third, they may be individuals who think deeply, feel deeply, and trust slowly. They don't express themselves casually. They think before they speak, observe before they act, reflect before they reveal. To them, privacy isn't a wall, it's a garden protecting what matters most. Another psychological trait stands out as well. Those who don't share their photos often have a different relationship with self-perception. While some enjoy capturing and sharing their image, others feel a distance between how they look and who they are inside. Their self-image isn't visual, it's emotional, mental, philosophical. Their sense of self comes from what they think, not how they appear. This creates a fascinating experience. When they look at a photo of themselves, they don't feel seen. They feel represented, and representation feels too shallow for them. They aren't afraid of being judged. They're afraid of being reduced to angles, lighting, or a still frame that can't possibly capture their depth. They want to be known for their essence, not their image. Here's something that resonates quietly with many. Some individuals don't post their photos because they are perfectionists of spirit, not appearance. Not in a stressful way, but in a thoughtful one. They want things to mean something. They want their expression to feel authentic. Forced expression feels untrue to them. They don't post casually because their identity isn't casual. If a moment doesn't feel emotionally aligned, they simply don't share it. It's not about hiding, it's about honesty. Then there's another truth, one many whisper but rarely admit. Some people simply feel more comfortable as observers. Not because they lack confidence, but because they see the world with a depth that makes them more interested in studying human dynamics than participating in the constant presentation of self. They love watching how people interact, learning, reflecting, understanding the emotional layers behind actions. In that quiet reflection, posting a photo feels like stepping out of their natural habitat. But don't mistake quietness for lack of presence. Some of the most thoughtful souls are those who rarely reveal themselves, and some of the most self-aware people are those who don't post anything that feels unnecessary. Research quietly supports this. Individuals who value privacy often have stronger boundaries, clearer emotional awareness, and deeper relationships with themselves. They aren't avoiding the world, they're curating their relationship with it. Imagine someone like this scrolling through social media. They see others posting their lives, trips, celebrations, faces, reflections. They aren't judgmental or dismissive. They simply feel something different inside. This inner voice shapes their choices. Here's where the psychology becomes most interesting. Some people don't post their photos because they understand something profound about human nature. When you stay a little hidden, people relate to you differently. They listen more, imagine more, project less. They connect to your words, your presence, your ideas, not your appearance. They connect to your essence. For these individuals, being unseen becomes a quiet form of freedom. Freedom to express without being defined, freedom to observe without pressure, freedom to be themselves without performing. When they do choose to show their face, if they ever do, it's meaningful, intentional, personal. not an obligation or a habit, but a choice. There's also a philosophical side to this. Some people simply don't feel the need to immortalize themselves through images. They live through sensations, memories, reflections, inner experiences. They carry their life inside them, not on a screen. Their moments aren't content, they're chapters. Their days aren't stories to be broadcast, they're experiences to be lived. For them, life isn't a gallery, it's a journey. The most beautiful truth about those who don't post their photos is this: they aren't trying to hide from the world, they're trying to experience it more deeply. In a strange way, they often understand something many forget. A face isn't the whole story, presence is bigger than visibility, identity is deeper than appearance, and life is richer than what can be captured in a frame. Whether anyone realizes it or not, people who live this way often carry a rare depth, a rare introspection, a rare authenticity. They see life from the inside out, not the outside in, and in a world built on images, that alone makes them different. But there's still more to their psychology, much more. Behind their choice lies a quiet emotional landscape that reveals something profound about how they relate to themselves and the world. There's a moment, often unnoticed, when someone who never posts their photos sits alone with their thoughts and wonders why the world treats visibility as proof of existence. They watch others capturing every angle, every expression, every glimpse of their face, and a quiet question rises within them. Why must I show myself for my life to be real? The answer they arrive at is simple, gentle, and deeply human. I don't. This is where the psychology deepens, because those who don't post their photos often live with a heightened sense of inner life. They experience themselves from the inside, not the outside. Their self-awareness isn't shaped by how they appear, but by how they think, feel, and make sense of the world. Because of this, their relationship with self-image becomes profoundly different. But for someone who rarely shows their face, the feeling is different. They don't find their identity in the visible. They find it in the invisible. The thoughts behind the eyes, the private emotions that don't need an audience, the internal journey that doesn't benefit from documentation. They don't feel incomplete without public visibility. They feel grounded in their quiet. There's a wisdom in that, a wisdom the modern world often forgets. We live in a culture that encourages creating a visual narrative of life, but those who refrain often ask a simple, profound question. What is the purpose of this? Not cynically, not judgmentally, but reflectively. They wonder whether a moment loses its meaning if it isn't displayed, and for them it does not. In fact, it often gains meaning when kept private. This doesn't make them distant, it makes them sincere. Something else is at play, something subtle. For those who rarely post their photos, taking a picture of themselves can feel strangely artificial, not because they dislike their appearance or fear judgment, but because the act feels disconnected from how they naturally exist. Their self-perception isn't built on visuals, it's built on awareness, character, insight, lived experience. To them, taking a photo feels like translating their identity into a language that doesn't truly capture it, and every translation loses something. A picture might represent them, but it doesn't express them. Expression matters more. Many of these individuals share a quiet sensitivity to being observed, not in a negative way, but in a perceptive one. They're aware, consciously or subconsciously, that being watched changes human behavior. The moment someone knows they're being seen, something shifts, and for those who value authenticity, that shift feels uncomfortable. So they choose presence over performance, reality over representation, genuine experience over captured image. There's something almost poetic about how they navigate the digital world. While others document the surface of life, they document the depth of it, their thoughts, reflections, insights, observations. These are what they offer to the world. Quietly or openly, they live with an awareness that identity isn't built from pixels, but from consciousness. Here's another layer that goes deeper. Those who don't post their photos often have a strong internal sense of autonomy. They like owning themselves. They like knowing their identity isn't accessible to anyone who scrolls past. They like that only the people who truly know them get to see their real expressions, their real presence, their real light. Their face becomes something sacred, something intimate, something shared deliberately rather than automatically. This doesn't mean they have barriers. It means they have boundaries. Healthy ones, ones that modern technology often dissolves, but they choose to preserve. Boundaries are a sign of emotional maturity, not avoidance. Let's explore another layer, one that speaks to something universal but rarely acknowledged. Those who don't post their photos often have a unique relationship with time. A picture freezes a moment, but not everyone wants their moments frozen. Some want their memories to remain fluid, alive, personal. They want their experiences to breathe and evolve within them, not sit still in a digital archive. Their connection to life is experiential, not visual. They prefer remembering how something felt rather than how something looked. This helps them understand something many overlook. Not every moment needs to be preserved. Some moments are meant to be lived once, then carried softly in the heart. For those who hold this perspective, posting a photo often feels like interrupting the flow of experience, turning living into documenting, feelings into content. They instinctively resist anything that pulls them away from presence. Here's a psychological insight most people don't know. Individuals who rarely post their face often score higher in what researchers call private self-consciousness. That means they're more aware of their inner world, their thoughts, reflections, self-evolution, rather than public self-consciousness, which is awareness of how they appear to others. This doesn't mean they're self-critical, it means they're self-aware. Self-aware people tend to choose their expressions intentionally rather than impulsively. They don't feel the emotional urgency to show themselves because the validation mechanism doesn't activate in the same way. Their minds aren't trained to seek public reflection. Instead, they live with what psychologists call an internal locus of identity. They define themselves through introspection, personal values, and inner stability. They don't need mirrors, cameras, or digital applause. They feel real because they know themselves, not because others see them. But this doesn't mean their lives lack connection. In fact, those who don't post their photos often have deeper connections with the people they trust. They're intentional with who they share themselves with, and intentionality creates intimacy. When they show their face to someone, it means something. In a world where everything is shared casually, intentionally shared presence becomes almost a gift. There's another psychological perspective worth mentioning. Some people don't post themselves because they have a unique sense of personal narrative. Their identity isn't a timeline of pictures, it's a gradual evolution of understanding. They don't need to catalog their growth visually, they feel it internally. These moments matter far more than how they appeared in a photograph, so the need to post their face feels irrelevant. The most misunderstood aspect of their psychology is this: many of them don't avoid the camera. They avoid the pressure that comes with being witnessed. They don't fear visibility, they fear distortion. They know that once a picture is posted, people interpret it through their own filters, perceptions, biases, and projections, and these interpretations rarely reflect the truth. So they quietly choose accuracy over exposure, the integrity of their inner life over the uncertainty of public perception. There's another part, quiet but powerful. Those who don't post their photos often feel a deeper connection to anonymity. Not because they want to disappear, but because anonymity allows them to be fully themselves without distraction, assumptions, expectations, or the unconscious influence of being observed. Anonymity becomes a form of psychological freedom, and for people with rich inner worlds, freedom is more valuable than visibility. Let's go even deeper, to a truth people rarely explore. Some individuals don't post their photos because they're highly empathetic. They feel things deeply, absorb emotions from others, and because of that, they're sensitive to the emotional risks of exposure. They don't want to open themselves to judgment they never asked for. don't want their face to trigger assumptions or misunderstandings, don't want to carry emotional weights that don't belong to them. So they quietly choose peace over performance, and peace for them is the ability to exist without needing to be seen. Perhaps the most poetic part of their psychology is this: those who don't post their photos often have an old soul way of experiencing life. They treat their presence as something private. Their face isn't a symbol, a brand, or a statement. It's simply a part of their humanity, not a tool. Somewhere deep inside, they feel the world doesn't need their face to know their heart. They feel their presence can be known through their words, thoughts, character, actions, energy. They trust that their essence speaks louder than any picture ever could, and they're right because presence isn't something you show, it's something you carry. Let's look at one more element, one that reveals something profound. Those who don't post their photos often have a refined sense of privacy that comes from understanding the difference between being open and being exposed. These individuals can be incredibly open with their emotions, insights, and reflections, but they're careful about exposure because exposure allows others to define them without truly knowing them. They guard themselves from that not out of fear, but out of self-respect. They don't want to be misinterpreted, reduced, or understood through fragments. They want to be known in full by people who take the time to understand. Some might call them mysterious, but mystery is just another name for depth in a world moving too fast to notice. Here's something important. Those who don't post their photos aren't against visibility. They're against unnecessary visibility. They're not hiding, they're choosing. They're not avoiding the world, they're navigating it with intention. They understand that the most meaningful things in life often stay unphotographed: the laughter shared in private conversations, the quiet moments of reflection, the personal growth that happens when nobody is watching, the realizations that change you even though no one else can see them. These are the moments they value most, and because they value them, they protect them. Now picture this individual again, scrolling, reading, observing. They see others posting, sharing, celebrating, expressing. They feel no envy, no comparison, no pressure, just a peaceful awareness that their path is different and that there's strength in difference. They know visibility doesn't equal value, attention doesn't equal worth, being seen doesn't make you real, and not being seen doesn't make you invisible. Their identity lives somewhere deeper, somewhere even the highest resolution camera can't capture. Maybe that's why people find something quietly magnetic about them, because there's a depth you can sense even when you can't see them. A presence that doesn't require presentation, a voice that doesn't require a face, a soul that doesn't require framing. The world often misunderstands them, but they rarely misunderstand themselves. And that, in the end, is the remarkable psychology behind those who don't post their photos. They aren't resisting the world, they're resisting the pressure to become something they're not. They aren't seeking invisibility, they're protecting authenticity. They aren't afraid to be seen, they're unwilling to be simplified. They understand that some parts of the human experience are more beautiful when kept close, that some truths are more sacred when not displayed, that the self is richest when it belongs first to the person living inside it. And they know something else, something almost everyone eventually realizes. The most meaningful kind of presence cannot be captured, it can only be felt. And for them, that is enough. If this resonated with you, feel free to like this video, subscribe for more thoughtful insights, and share it with someone who might appreciate a different perspective. Parts of the human experience are more beautiful when kept close, that some truths are more sacred when not displayed, that the self is richest when it belongs first to the person living inside it. And they know something else, something almost everyone eventually realizes. The most meaningful kind of presence cannot be captured, it can only be felt. And for them, that is enough. If this resonated with you, feel free to like this video, subscribe for more thoughtful insights, and share it with someone who might appreciate a different perspective.